You raise a good point there about, the value of the business and things, being a multiplier. Probably not a lot of people realize that a business is worth multiples of what it earns. So as you say, a 200K business, probably sitting around 600K, give or take. I mean, that could be anywhere from 200K to over $1 million, depending on the industry and that sort of thing. And we've sort of got a bit of an unfair advantage in New Zealand because when you sell a business, it's generally tax-free. Pay a few transaction fees, you might pay sort of 6-8%.
Hello, welcome to the Ways to Wealth podcast. Today I'm joined by Jono. Jono, why don't you give us the TLDR on who you are and what got you here?
Cool. Okay, so I'm Jono. I've got a accounting business which I've had for 5 years, Lloyd-West Tax Advisory. I've also got another import-export business in catering supplies, which I actually bought off a couple of my clients about 4 years ago.
Oh, cool.
So we're mostly just focused on the catering supplies industry. So if you want any palm leaf plates, I'm your guy. But yeah, living in the Gold Coast at the moment, have been since January, just on a bit of a working holiday, I guess you could say.
Yeah, but there's still operates here.
Still operating out of New Zealand. So I've got a couple of remote staff in the Philippines with the accounting. So
Yeah.
they help out there. And what I was finding was that my clients who are Auckland based pretty much never even come in and see you anyway. So probably the biggest hurdle to actually being able to work offshore is really just the time zones difference.
Right.
So in the Gold Coast, only a 3-hour time difference. So it's all pretty manageable, and everyone gets up there at 4 a.m. anyway. So
Oh, really?
it gets light about 4 a.m. there.
Right, okay.
I don't personally get
Fair.
but it's still quite easy to work New Zealand hours.
Yeah, okay. And then you're ending early.
Not that I do.
No, but business owner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, still sort of finish up about 4 or 5 o'clock. So, it's not like super early, slightly earlier than here.
Is the motivation so you can get some free time though, like in a space that you haven't basically spent much time in, or what was the motivation behind the working holiday?
Lifestyle, really. Yeah, and I think probably towards the end of last year, the motivation was sort of waning a bit. I'd sort of ticked off a couple of goals. And,
Okay.
we spent a month overseas and then, had surgery for a couple of weeks, and just getting back into it, it was, the motivation just sort of wasn't where it could have been.
Yeah.
And me and my partner had sort of talked about, potentially spending a bit of time overseas.
Yeah.
I'd always kind of said no to the idea because,
But you're in build up mode, building that kind of infrastructure and building that kind of reputation, etc., and you're kind of gear stability.
Exactly. And once you sort of generally set up a business, you're sort of fixed to that
For a few
location. And so, it was never really what we're actually planning on going through with.
Yeah.
But we just decided let's give it a crack. We'd pulled out doing LA at the time, just differences a bit ugly. Plus trying to spend New Zealand dollars over there.
Oh man,
That's pretty heady.
New Zealand dollar peso.
Yeah, pretty much. So we landed on Australia. At least that's nice and handy.
Totally.
To when we want to come home, as in right now.
Yeah.
So I'm actually back for a wedding as well.
Oh yeah. Nice.
I think that'll be a fun start.
Yes, that's nice. That's awesome. So, I'm going to really enjoy going into the business you bought off your clients. Really interesting. We will get there soon, I'm sure. But were you always entrepreneurial? Why did you originally start the first business, and what kind of led up to that? Like what prepared you for it, and kind of what was the catalyst that made you kind of start your own thing?
I actually started my first business when I was at university.
All right.
So I was sort of chipping away at uni, and I think growing up, we didn't have a lot of wealth. I think probably what got me interested in wealth was because we just didn't have a lot of it growing up. I mean, my parents did the best they could. We had everything we needed, but not necessarily everything we wanted. So it was up to us to sort of fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
So probably from quite a young age, I was, sort of somewhat having to fend for myself. If I wanted a new phone, I would need to save up and buy that myself with my $5 or $10 a week pocket money or what have you, or clean their car or mow the lawns, in order to sort of build up the capital to buy it. Funny story on that, actually. I got involved in the crypto space when I was about 14.
How did you?
Bought a few Bitcoins back then, about $100 each.
Really?
Found this dodgy site that was selling iPhone 5s.
Yeah.
As again, parents wouldn't buy me a phone, so I was like, okay, I'm going to buy mine. I'm going to buy the best in the business. So saved up, a lot of money at that time, $400 or whatever it was. I think they were retailing about $800-900, and found this dodgy site that said that they were selling them out of the factory, sort of under the table type of thing. Paid in Bitcoin, or so just into the ether.
Oh, you never got your phone.
Never got.
Dude, that is that you've heard of the pizza story. You must have heard.
10,000 Bitcoin.
It wouldn't. I don't know if it's 10,000, but it was a ridiculous amount of Bitcoin for a pizza or 2 pizzas and for him and his daughter or something.
Yeah, I think it was the first Bitcoin transaction.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I know that. Yeah, whatever it was, he paid for it. Yeah, paid for a pizza, and obviously now it's probably like, damn it.
Yeah, why did I do that?
And
yeah,
but it's even worse for you because you didn't even get the thing you wanted.
Why even get it?
No.
When I sort of look at it now, I mean, that would be about $600K.
Yeah, which wouldn't be New Zealand dollars.
Yeah,
dollars. Yeah. That would be nice, but you live and learn.
You live and learn. So, basically, we needed to come up with anything that we wanted. So I think that's originally I sort of sat there at university and I said, well, I'm going to be a millionaire by 35.
Oh, yeah.
With the view of sort of being retired by 50 or financially independent.
Yeah.
So if I still want to work, then that's up to me.
Yeah.
And then that was sort of the catalyst to starting my business. So what I worked out is I built this spreadsheet.
Right.
And surprise,
Oh, no.
The only way that I knew how to make money at that time was in property. Classic New Zealand story. You just think, it's the way to do it.
The only way to make money I had.
Yeah. Yeah. So 20 odd years old or whatever.
Yeah.
That was all I knew.
Yeah.
And so what I worked out was that if I had 60,000 by the time I left university, I would be a millionaire by 35. So I sort of worked out, well, based on the capital growth rate, but based on the pay down of the debt, I'll be able to buy the next one, and sort of hop, skip, and a jump, get there, and then I'll sort of be financially free by 50.
Yeah.
So I mean, as part of starting the business, I still looked at it as an income source.
Yeah.
I didn't actually look at it as actually building its own asset.
As an asset, yeah.
Yeah. So that was sort of part of it. I started doing a little bit of accounting for clients while I was at university, studying accounting. And
so mainly focus on reconciliation, bookkeeping. So
yeah, just all the basics, a little bit of payroll.
Yeah.
And then sort of moving through into actually doing the end of year accounts, GST. And then providing advice as best I could as a very fresh grad. So, or not even grad at that point. So I mean that was sort of how that one came about, and then sort of through those relationships, picked up a couple of clients, and then it was those clients who sort of came to me with another idea that they had. I then ultimately ended up buying them out of that business.
And this was the
catering supplies one.
And which of the two is your focus?
At the moment, it's the accounting.
Yeah.
But there has been times where the other one has been generating the lion's share.
Right. Yeah.
So it's sort of, when it sort of started off, it was like the accounting was making more money. Then that one overtook it, and then now the accounting's back over there. I'd taken it again. So yeah, they sort of go on waves. It's probably not the best thing having split attention.
Right. Are you operating in both?
Yeah, somewhat. So I've got staff in both, but at least, I mean, it's still sort of oversight on both. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. But it's good to have a diversified set of assets as well that bring you income.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Which is pretty cool. Did you get a bargain in the for the catering business?
No, I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
I definitely overpaid what I think objectively it was worth.
Right. Do you feel like that was because you had a relationship with them, so it's hard to negotiate?
Yeah, it was
unfair advantage as well because they were your client.
Yeah, well, exactly that. But yeah, I mean, it was certainly more than I wanted to pay. Was probably not as much as they wanted to receive. But I suppose ultimately, kind of
met in the middle-ish.
Yeah, met in the middle-ish, and it turned out to be a good investment. Yeah.
So, and is that both of those businesses with the intention of building a property portfolio, or have you sort of seen the light?
I've sort of seen the light, put it that way. I mean, I did actually go on to buy that first property. So I think I graduated uni in May 2021 and I bought
Yep.
a property in May 2021 as
Oh,
well.
sick.
So I managed to stump up 61,000 to buy that one.
And that was not in Auckland, I'm guessing?
No, that was Palmerston North.
Yeah, cool. Is that a rent?
So it's an Airbnb at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But it has been tenanted and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I didn't quite meet my 60,000 that I needed to save up by the time I left uni, so I had to actually call my mum and ask for another 18,000,
Oh, okay.
which I've paid.
Which is still pretty good to get that close.
Yeah, it was sort of I maxed out my student loan,
Right.
and I think, there's sort of a lesson of leverage there. When it's interest-free debt,
Yeah.
pretty much like that 43K or whatever I had when I left uni would, if I'd have chosen not to take my student loan, I've chosen to work or whatever instead, which was.
Right, you're working as well.
Well, just, with building businesses and, doing X, Y, Z. But I mean, I'm sure that would have been the balance on my living costs alone. So I remember at uni, there was, a whole lot of people that they would either not take the full amount of their loan. They'd be like, I don't need to take the full lot. Or they just wouldn't take it at all. They'd have parents who support them.
Yeah.
But I think it's a real mistake because it's like, well, you could actually, the banks don't really consider it when you're going in for lending.
Right.
It's sort of just like, yes, it's debt, but they don't really see it as like true debt.
Yeah.
So then, you can actually build up capital, which you then repay interest free over, however many number of years.
What percentage of that debt, though, has to go towards tuition or covers the tuition costs? How does it work? So never experienced university, but
okay, yeah. So you can either pay your fees outright, so they might be 13,000 a year or something.
Yeah.
Or you can just get a loan to pay them. Yeah, which just goes directly to the university, or you can get, and then on top of that, you can get a living cost allowance as well, which is about $250 a week.
Oh, okay.
And then I think you get an extra, you can get course related costs out, which is another 1,000. I mean, it's been a few years since I've been there. So I don't know if things have changed, but basically, if you think, $250 a week over however many years plus, $1,000 a year as well on top. I mean, if you just sort of stack that away, you can actually come away not doing too badly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could even put it in a term deposit and you'd win. Technically.
Exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's all interest-free debt. I mean, I'm sure
they don't like that.
Probably wouldn't like us spitting that sort of advice, but
yeah,
I mean, ultimately, it's there. I mean, it's available. So
yeah, it's interesting. Actually, I've heard in the US it's a lot freer as well. Like but it's not interest free. But the amount you can not abuse, well, I'm going to call the word, maybe abuse, leverage the debt available to you in the US. I've heard some crazy stories about the amount of debt that people have been able to get and also use not towards studies, like towards trading or all sorts of endeavors, which is pretty risky, especially in the US when you are paying interest. Because in the US, they pay interest on the student loans.
Yeah, they're huge student loans, hundreds of thousands, I think.
Yeah, I remember watching a Dave Ramsey episode once, and there was a guy that had $1 million in student loans.
Wow, maybe he was sort of one of those guys who repeated.
I think he did two degrees, and they were medical. Both of them are medical, or something like that.
12 years of study or something.
That's tough, man. That's tough. That's tough. That's a tough hole to climb out of.
Yeah. Oh, especially when it's interest bearing.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't, I mean, you'd be there a while.
Yeah, you'd be there a while even without the interest. But with the interest, it's like, no. Oh, no. No, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, I think it's always good to try and leverage what you can to give you the resources to go and make moves. The thing is, you just got to make moves with it and recognize that there's risk associated with almost any decision we make. But that's pretty cool. What got you interested in crypto early? Or was it just speculation and online forums and you're like, oh, I'm just going to buy a bit of Bitcoin? Or did you kind of actually have some conviction around the technology itself?
I mean, to be fair, I was probably a bit of both. I was somewhat convinced about it, like banking the unbanked
right.
sort of thing. I was like, this is actually a really interesting space.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe there's a little bit of speculation to it. I don't think anyone, well, certainly I didn't predict where it was going to go. So when it was at $100 when I found it, and I think it started off at 1 cent or something.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, okay, well, we'd seen it go up a bit, but I don't think anyone was thinking, okay, soon it'll be worth hundreds of thousands or 140, 100,000, X amount, whatever it is, and the sort of trajectory that it's probably on.
Yeah.
So I don't think I really looked at it as like, this is going to be a huge investment. Otherwise, I would have kept them. Said I wouldn't have bought a dodgy I wouldn't have gone buying iPhones. I would have been like, well, now I'm minted. I thought I'll just keep these and sit those here.
I mean, the hard thing about crypto, I think, is like the security side of it, like actually keeping it, whether it's through selling it poorly, which I think is the smaller risk. I think the higher risk is obviously it's uninsured assets.
Yeah.
It's, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You keep it on a platform. It's an unregulated, uninsured piece of that asset. So it's very like you're kind of constrained there. You go through an ETF, you're paying expense for it, management fees essentially, and it kind of defeats the purpose of it. And then you keep it yourself, and then you have hardware risk and you losing your passphrase or something like that. So it's a tough space to be. And for me, I'm a bit biased in around. I just love productive assets. However, I can see why the use case and the appreciation over the last couple of years has taken place, given the banking crisis you had in 23. That was quite a nice win, I think, for crypto and Bitcoin. And then obviously with the debasing of fiat is, just kind of making money go everywhere because it was just an unprecedented amount of liquidity in the market. But yeah, cool. So you were always entrepreneurial. You basically went straight in on your own then. So you've never worked for anyone?
No, never worked for anyone. Well, apart from, odd jobs, but never
had a career.
And not in the sense of a career.
Yeah.
Just gave it a crack on my own.
And was that a bit of luck? Not luck, but like a little bit of like, I'm going to have a go, going to have a crack, and it worked out. Do you know if it hadn't have worked out, you'd have probably looked into a job or you'd...
Absolutely. I mean, at the time I was actually looking into, it was a toss-up.
Right.
It was sort of basically go and work for 47K.
Yeah.
Even though at the time I was sort of already earning about 25.
Right.
So not a lot, but just in my spare time.
Yeah.
Servicing my
Quite good.
And so it was sort of like, well, I'm doing maybe 10 hours a week and earning 25K. And I didn't really like that whole thing. And it seemed like when I was speaking with firms, they weren't really sort of acknowledging or willing to sort of budge on that starting salary, because I was sort of like, well, look, I've actually already got a few smaller clients. I sort of know what I'm doing.
And I'm got 70% of my take-home pay or something, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
From my income.
So, yeah, I mean, it was... I wasn't really enjoying it so much, those sort of conversations with potential employers and things. Missed out on a role at Deloitte. So interviewed there and then missed out on that one.
Well, they maybe.
But probably. And then, I was speaking with another accountant friend of mine who's 10 years older than me. And he just sort of said, I don't know why you're sort of bothering with that route. He's like, you've already sort of proven that you can do it.
Right.
He's like, just give it a crack for a year. And that was probably some of the best advice I'd got, because at the time I sort of looked at it and I said, what do you mean? I can't go and do that on my own. He said, well, not with that attitude.
Right.
So that was great advice. And then at least from that, I could sort of leverage off of him. I tried not to obviously be a pest, but at least I sort of had people in the industry I could contact when it was sort of like, wait, how do we do that? I've never been taught.
Right.
So
that's good.
Yeah, that was good. So him and his business partner have been really good.
Well,
a lot.
And they in the same business, same line of business.
Yeah. Yes, they're accountants.
Yeah, so they could do, they could acquire your book one day.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose that's...
I mean, you might not be thinking about that, but it's good to have like you say, a strong network with people that are ahead of you. Because it's free advice, which is awesome. They've got some scars that you may not have yet, and you can preferably avoid them if if you're lucky enough. And then also there's exit opportunities, when you have those relationships with senior businesses, it always gives you that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, it's been invaluable just having a bit of a support system, which you otherwise probably would get when you're in an employment role. But yeah, I mean, it basically just worked out.
And kudos for him for actually saying, I'll go and give it a crack rather than being like, hey, come work for me.
Yeah, well, I think it was just at the time they didn't really have
Right.
too much in the way of opportunity.
So they might have actually done that. He might have actually suggested that if they did.
Yeah, I would
speculate.
I would say so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't think they were in the position of catering. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean that was good. Sort of getting the right advice at the right time.
Yeah.
Just to sort of back yourself. And I think what really made me decide that it was the best thing to do was that you can always try it for a year, and then go back and knock on the door and say, I've had a bit of a year off trying something.
Yeah.
Will you still take me? And they'll say absolutely.
Yeah.
So you can that's always an option, but it's like, well, this may not be. And I think
and when you're young, when you've got less responsibilities, you might not have kids yet. You have a house in Palmerston North, but that's a small mortgage compared to if you were buying in Auckland. So your kind of obligations are less. So therefore, you can take some risk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the best time to do it. And I think that's the thing is people probably don't consider the opportunity cost of some of those decisions. Like I'm not saying that you shouldn't go and have kids, but say once you do have kids, well then your options are limited. You have
to take more risk. I remember.
Yeah.
I mean, I already had a business before my son was born. I've got 3 kids, and we had no one here because we moved here from the UK.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had my first business without any kids, but then all the venture businesses that I've got involved in, all the startups and tech businesses I've got involved in, had kids. It is hard.
Yeah, I mean, it would be. I mean, not only is it sort of split attention, but suddenly you've got a family to provide for.
Yeah, I remember in the hospital twice, 2 occasions when we were doing the whole birthing thing, doing like due diligence and final signing of investment rounds. Yeah, which is nuts. The third one though, I was actually playing World of Warcraft in the hospital while I was waiting.
What how your priorities had changed.
Yeah, maybe at that number 3. But yeah, that's right. I had it sorted. I was playing video games while my wife was giving birth. That's can't make it in. Anyway, that's cool. And then the decision to buy the catering business. Obviously, you saw the opportunity because they were a client. But like, why do that to yourself?
Well, I think what it was is because I already had 20% of it.
Oh, okay.
Well, actually, by that time I had 33, so I started off with 20%.
And that was like founding it.
That was basically. So I sort of started it with them, and that was sort of on the basis that I'd work for free.
Right.
Says and provide accounting to it for free, and then also provide a bit of
guidance, network,
build the revenue
support system.
And so I sort of got to work, and then by the because they both had their own businesses with staff, so for them it was probably more of a side hustle thing. They were sort of like let's just do this on the side.
Yeah.
For me, because I was sort of fairly early in my business career, I was still chipping away with my clients, but I also was sort of like, well, I don't really have a lot behind me, sort of like that.
Did you feel like the accounting business was more of like selling time? That wasn't an asset?
It really is just selling time. I mean,
but you kind of feel it's more of an asset now? Or do you still feel like the asset value is just not what you want?
The asset value is probably not what you want. I mean, the thing is that I think in the accounting industry, the margins are sort of slimmed right up with a lot of the offshoring going on.
Right.
So, I mean, we do it as well. We've got two staff over there, but it sort of means that like the actual fees that people are going to market and charging are fairly minuscule.
Right.
So it's sort of like it's not a very massive revenue business. What can be when you get into like sort of providing high level advice and that sort of thing, but sort of in your nitty gritty tax compliance and tax returns and that sort of basic support, wraparound stuff, payroll, bookkeeping. There's just really not there's no money. No one wants to pay for it because it's like, well, they know that they can go down the road and get it for a cheaper price,
20% lower or whatever.
Then sort of means that in order to compete, you sort of actually have to do that yourself. And then, the trouble is that ultimately your business value is sort of relatively slim, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it's only going to get worse with the sort of AI stuff.
Are you guys embracing it?
Embracing it. So we're using Ada, which is like an AI type product, which has been pretty good. So it gives us sort of like
Bit of productivity.
bit of productivity. So early warning detection on people's when people aren't putting aside enough for tax, things like that. So previously we would have to go into the client, basically review their position, work out maybe what their estimated tax position is, how much tax do you have set aside.
Yeah.
And so we're sort of doing that 3 times a year anyway. Just going out and having a full wash up and then providing advice on that. But this kind of gives you a bit of an early warning detection. So it's sort of like, it'll come up as an alert on my screen saying, hey, this client's obviously pulled some money out of his business, or he's just made a whole bunch and he just doesn't have it there. You're going to need to go in and have a chat with them, basically. Right. So things like that, that's one example of what it does. It's quite a capable little bit of software.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to embrace it.
Yeah. Does that mean your long-term kind of aspirations are towards the catering business, perhaps?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's maybe. I mean, I just don't know. Like, because it's I think with accounting, I like it, but I can sort of see the writing on the wall as such. I mean, I think like providing good advice is always going to be thing. But like that sort of strategic type stuff. Business planning and that real advisory work, consulting, that sort of thing. There's always going to be money in that. And of course, that's going to be driven by AI as well. I mean, you can punch into ChatGPT and ask for a business plan. I'll give you one in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't know if that's really what I enjoy. Like, I think I'm just more of a numbers guy.
Right.
I think if I was sort of going to be putting, a lot of time into business strategy, I'd almost rather do that in my own business.
Yeah. For sure.
But then I don't know necessarily if catering supplies is the be all and end all either. So I'm enjoying it, as in it's been a good sort of 5 years in business. That's not like I'm not enjoying the business generally. Do I see it long term, the way it's going? Probably not.
Right.
I'd probably see us doing something entirely different.
Okay. Well, then let's start thinking about that. Let's start talking about that then. So what is, like, 5 years from now? It's been 5. So you basically got through the horrible 2-year step. You're at this kind of itchy 5-year kind of moment where it's like you're halfway there to an overnight success. And then obviously in 5 years from now, it'll be 10 years and that's where all the overnight successes happen. So what does 5 years from now look like? Is that close to your 35-year goal, or your 35-year-old goal as well?
Yeah, I mean,
because how old are you?
Yeah, I'm 27.
Yeah, okay, cool.
So
you got 7 years to get to your goal.
8 years.
8 years to get. Yeah, that's pretty good though. You got ages.
Yeah. No, and it's looking pretty good, I suppose, depending on how you valued it. We're probably already there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like particularly if you lump in like the business values.
You got to have all the assets in.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it just shows that what was going to take 15 years in property, you can probably do a little bit sooner. And
well, and you don't have that leverage component as well, right? Exactly. That caught a lot of people. That we've done so many financial well-being consultations for employers. That's one of the things we do.
Yeah.
The amount of people that have amazing incomes that are just not happy.
Yeah.
Because they've ultimately consumed too many financial products.
Yeah.
Sometimes too much insurance, too much protection in the insurance space. Like, I'm scared of losing my job, I'm going to pay for this. Oh, I'm also going to have some component to my mortgage that will allow me to draw it because I'm scared about income or losing my job. That all has a cost. And then massive mortgages.
So it's not about how much you earn, it's how much you keep, right?
Yeah, that's right. And how much principal you can pay of an asset if you are paying an asset off. Like, I do find like the idea of leverage buyouts quite interesting. And no, they don't have to be leverage, but leverage buyouts kind of, if you've got some confidence, I get why there's a space for it, especially in New Zealand, where I'd say the average business value of an SME is probably undervalued, just because the succession planning is not there. You've got key person risk and you've not got enough modernization.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think like that's why I was really intrigued by the catering aspect of what you are doing, because someone that's good with numbers, good operator can go in and get some bargains in the form of SMEs, right? And then bit of modernization, bit of cost cutting, and you've got something that might be making. I was looking at a motel recently,
Right.
and it was 600K, I think was what they were asking. It might still be on the market. They had like 80% occupancy. It came with a 3-bed. No, you didn't own the land, so it was a lease.
Oh, okay.
But you had 16 motel property thingies, 16 units.
Yeah.
And then you had a 3-bedroom house that you could live in. And the owner was taking 70K, or 70 to 80K in salary from themselves, plus the business was net profit was about 120K a year.
Right. So about 200K.
Yeah.
That was the owner's
Big Valley.
earnings.
Yeah.
Such.
So not too bad.
Yeah. So it's about a 3 times multiple.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And a 3 times mode. And I think that they would have, because the lease was coming up relatively soon. That was, I think, the big risk in the business. And also, I might even be up now.
Right.
So I wonder if it's still on. Because if they weren't able to sell it in that period, they'd have lost a lot of leverage. I mean, you maybe could have picked it up for 400 or 500K.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably what you raise a good point there about, the value of a business and things, being a multiplier. Probably not a lot of people realize that a business is worth multiples of what it earns.
Yeah.
So, as you say, a 200K business, probably sitting around 600K, give or take. I mean, that could be anywhere from 200K to over $1 million, depending on the industry and that sort of thing. And we've sort of got a bit of an unfair advantage in New Zealand because when you sell a business, it's generally tax-free.
Yeah.
You pay a few transaction fees. You might pay sort of 6-8%.
Depending if you use a broker or
a few lawyers' fees, which will suck up a bit. But ultimately, you walk away with the lion's share of this asset, no tax.
Yeah.
Which is actually quite a big wealth builder.
Oh, no, totally. It's a shame that the multiples aren't there for the owners. But you can get there. It's just that you've got to have a plan to get those multiples that you want. Because you might have been able to stretch that 3 multiple to 4 or 5 if they had specific things in place. But I think in that specific case, that lease was a big problem in the multiplier. But no, it was a cool. It's a cool thought experiment. Like we did a well-being consultation with a young guy saving 80% of his salary, earns really good money. Engineer, so also tinkering with some startup stuff, and he got pre-approval in the house. And we just did the numbers. We have a net worth tracker, like an interactive tool that we have built, and put in all the numbers. And he went from being able to save 80% of his salary to saving 0% of his salary,
right?
Because of the mortgage and the level of deposit versus the. And I was like, "Are you going to be happy?" Because that's a big shock, culture shock, right? And now, he's actually exploring buying a business, and then using the cash flow from the business to invest into other assets.
Yeah, sort of diversify from there to that point.
Keeping the job, keeping the high earning salary, getting some extra, buying an asset to get cash flow, not buying an asset to take on debt. Which I was like,
to lose cash flow.
You lose cash. So his cash flow might increase now by 20% from buying the business. And then you've got that equity value that you can grow, especially if you're a smart engineer, you put a few automations here and there, you might save yourself a couple grand a month. And that's enough to be meaningful for someone in their 20s.
Yeah.
To actually leverage that, do that for 5 years, do it again. There's no reason why, like kind of people in that space, early 20s, got a bit of cash saved up, can't systematically buy out these SMEs and these small businesses that don't have a natural buyer. And I think that's the risk to boomers right now, right? Is there's no natural buyer for their assets. Especially the bigger businesses, and then the properties. Like, where's the buyer? Where's the incremental buyer?
It's a really, really interesting point there about the properties because, supply demand, right?
Yeah.
And if these sort of heavily valued assets, no one wants to buy them.
Yeah.
What happens to them?
Yeah.
The ass falls out of them.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it will.
No.
But but it is just a sort of line. You look at the, capital growth over the last 50 odd years or whatever, and it's insane.
Yeah.
will that continue? I mean, I know past performance not usually a very good indicator of future performance, but I can't really see the value in it. I mean,
well, it's also misunderstood, right?
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with my friend yesterday. I've been talking about this for a long time. I'm like, look, even if your house price goes up now by 20%, if the currency goes down by 20%, you're even.
Yeah.
Might even be less.
Yeah.
You actually be potentially worse off. So like we should actually be measuring our assets in our global buying power, because so much of what we consume is ultimately denominated in US dollars.
Yeah, right.
And over the last couple of years, we've had our house prices go down and our dollars got crushed. So like and then if you see a bump in the property price, has your wealth gone up, or actually you're still down because the currency sucks?
Yeah.
Which I don't think that's necessarily an issue forever. But I think it's being realistic around, hey, I buy oil because I have to have gas in my car. I buy all these subscriptions from these providers in the US that are charging me ultimately in US dollars. So, and where's the supply that I'm buying my inventory from? Probably denominated ultimately in US dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you buy out of China, they still work in US dollars.
So it's a tough one for us right now. And I think a lot of it's driven by our currency.
Yeah, well, I mean, currency's a depreciating asset.
Yeah.
So, I mean, with inflation, the purchasing power on it's continually going down. And not a lot of people realize that. They'll be stacking away money into a savings.
Yeah.
And because I see it sometimes where people have too much savings.
Yeah. Businesses as well, right? Holding too much cash in their business, not drawing on it, or
sometimes you have the opposite problem where it's like the business has no cash, but then there is actually plenty of times where you go, actually, you've got too much cash.
Yeah.
This is depreciating on you.
Yeah. Go do something with it.
Probably do something with it, whether it's within the business or whether it's in your personal life.
Yeah.
Even if it's buying some shares or crypto or, just have a go.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like the whole treasury, the two things I think are underdeveloped in New Zealand would probably be succession planning in personal like structures and personal families, like kind of working out how to actually do that correctly and thinking about it. And then two might be business, company treasuries. Like, they do it like you say, they actually don't necessarily need to take it out of the business. They could buy bonds, they could buy equities, they could have a treasury. There's no reason for us not to have a treasury in our business just because we're a small New Zealand-based business. Still, at the end of the day, from a first principles perspective, a business. It should operate exactly the same as a US conglomerate.
Yeah. I mean, there's absolutely no reason not. I think it's just that education piece. People go, their natural instinct is, when I've got some money there, I'll go and buy a property.
Yeah.
And then struggle and pay the debt. And then they sort of, turn around one day and go, oh, look, I've made 200K equity in my property or something.
And then they dug into it. I paid 400K in interest, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. Or even, just that top up. Let's say you're paying an extra 500 a week just to top this thing up. Get it done. 25K a year. After 5 years, you've actually paid in 125K in capital.
Yeah.
And you say, oh, but I've made 200 grand. You haven't really.
Yeah. Right.
You've made 75. So, but then you've also paid interest. So it's sort of like had that 500 a week being invested elsewhere. What's the opportunity cost on that?
Yeah.
Even if it was at 8%, you'd probably have a firmer idea. But after 5 years at that, that growing annuity, what does that look like?
Yeah. And you actually have liquidity.
Exactly.
Like, liquidity is something, for example, the FMA are really interested in New Zealand at the moment, because there are a lot of illiquid funds out there. And obviously you can have property and managed funds. That's really the kind of two areas where assets get driven into. Oh, and $230 billion of cash that isn't getting interest in New Zealand, that is going and funding 2-year mortgages. And the bank's making basically 100% margin on that. Not really, but an obscene amount.
There's no cost to it. You're freely giving it.
Yeah, you're freely giving it because they're sat in an account and it's not actually bearing interest in many cases. So there's this whole she'll be right kind of attitude here that I think we can which I really love about New Zealand, but also should be challenged in certain areas. Like, actually, maybe it's not all right to just give all of our interest to the banks because that's how it's been done, or leverage up because that's what we've been told is actually what's going to make you wealthy.
Yeah. So I mean, that's really we've touched on a couple of the cons on property.
Yeah.
But I mean, really the pro or the benefit to it is just the leverage. Like when you look at it as an asset,
Wow.
like if you were going to pay cash for a property, you might get 4 or 5% growth on it. It's not that great an asset.
No.
But if we average, if you leverage, so let's say you put 10% down, property goes up 5%, well, you've made 50% on your money. So that's a great investment. As in like, say,
because it's not made equal, because there's leverage in there, and leverage that you probably wouldn't be able to get on a business or on equities. Not every broker is going in and allowing you to get 5x leverage on your equity position, right?
Exactly.
So that's a real good point. But I think probably serves the purpose of, I think, stability in many cases. And then if the interest is less than what you'd be paying in rent, I think, okay, it's all about strategy actually and what you want to do. But I think there's this kind of status quo that we can just, there are more options out there, and I think most people build their wealth through their business, through their actual business.
Yeah. Well, when you look at all of the high net worth individuals, your Elon Musk, your Jeff Bezos, XYZ, Mark Zuckerberg, what do they all have in common? They've all got businesses.
Yeah.
I think you'd be, even on a New Zealand level, you look at Graham Hart, look at the Mowbrays, I think you'd actually be hard pressed to find anyone who's sort of that high net worth who doesn't have a business.
Yeah.
And so I think it's sort of like, well, if you want what someone's got,
they've got to go out and build it.
Yeah.
Or build equity in other businesses that are already there. It's a way to do it. It's probably slightly less risk and probably less painful.
Yeah.
Because you're not going from 0 to 1.
Well, absolutely. That's a great point there. I mean, you don't necessarily have to start a business yourself, because I don't actually think everyone should be in business themselves. I see a number of car crashes and it's not pretty sometimes because they just don't have the discipline or whatever it might be. But you don't need to start it yourself. So you look at, say, Warren Buffett. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, he's got Berkshire Hathaway, but
He's never started a business.
He's never started a business.
Yeah,
thought that's correct.
He bought business.
So, I mean, that's what his company does. He
bought
stocks. Buys stocks.
He bought stocks.
And so all he's really done is just invest in companies, and he's a multi-billionaire.
Yeah, one of the wealthiest people in the world. And I mean, really what he leveraged is cash flow through the insurance businesses and Berkshire in the early days to acquire more equity. And then what he's done is taken cash flow and bought shares back.
Yeah.
From, within Berkshire. They've stopped doing that now, which is interesting. He's not buying his own shares, which means that he doesn't think he thinks it's overvalued ultimately.
Yeah.
Holding a record amount of cash and then trimming his positions recently, which makes a lot of sense, but it's not necessarily, we're all human. Like I wrote in my notebook yesterday, all your heroes are human, right? Like you think, I love Charlie Munger, I love Naval Ravikant, I've got this great appreciation for many amazing investors and operators and entrepreneurs, but they're human. Like they're like us. And, in the case of, Berkshire and Buffett owns more treasuries than the US government.
Right. I don't know that.
So there's no one more exposed to the US debt problem than Buffett. I don't know where that goes, but at the end of the day, there is a tail risk there that he holds that is so huge. We can't comprehend how much of a tail risk that is. You own more US debt than the government itself.
That's crazy. I did not realize that. Yeah.
And you have a fiscal problem. So that's gonna be super interesting to see how it unfolds. But I think it's an interesting piece to note because I think the easy analogy is, he's selling equities. That means something, and it does. It obviously means something. And he's not buying back his shares. I think that means something too. And he's holding all this cash. He has to because of the insurance businesses. But I think there's also, like, we're all human. So is there an error in his thinking around the amount of exposure he has to US debt? Don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah. I mean, because I suppose it's his subjective or his team's subjective
I mean, yeah, he like,
on the
what?
state of the economy.
Well, and he's like, I'd never bet against America. That's his thesis. His thesis there really is, well, the US won't default on its debt, or, there won't be bond vigilantes that come out and force higher interest rates, basically. And there won't be a revamping of inflation, which we don't know. There's conflicting evidence, I would say, at the moment. Yeah, so it's just an interesting piece, I think. And but like you say, he didn't start any businesses.
Yeah. And you don't need to. So, I mean, you could be an employee and just try and, there might be a share program or something. You can actually acquire shares.
Yeah.
It might be that your boss is a little bit older.
Yeah, and you've got an opportunity there.
Got an opportunity, not necessarily to buy the whole thing, but just acquire some of the shares.
Yeah.
And I think that, you make money by owning companies. You don't make money by running them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
actually, guy knows, he was a CFO at, a couple of NZX
and
things like that. And I was talking to him one day and he was saying that he was going to be buying he's looking to buy one or two more Auckland properties. And I sort of joked with him and said, oh, that must be nice, as in how much money you've got up your sleeve. And he said, my mistake is I never owned enough companies, because he was running these companies, in the executive roles and financial controller, CFO, all those sorts of things. But I really would have been on good money, maybe sometimes up to $1 million a year.
Yeah.
But the guys who actually own the company are making more than that, and they're not having to do anything.
Yeah, and once you own established business as well, you've got leverage opportunities there too. That's what the really wealthy people are doing. Ultimately, is they're leveraging their shares, which is even greater because you're leveraging against these inflating assets against money that's depreciating. It's pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a pretty big unfair advantage. Sure,
it's huge. And
comes with risks. Comes with blow up risk. I don't like blow up risk. Because if you can't blow up, and that's what I love about Buffett, is if you can't blow up, you're pretty safe. And leverage obviously kind of puts you in a situation where you can have a bit of a blow up, right?
Absolutely. And it's like there's tax advantages to that as well. When you're sort of leveraging the equity, that rather than, so like in the US, there's capital gains tax. So like Elon Musk does this quite a lot. He'll leverage off his shares rather than sell them. Because how he sells them, it's a tax capital gains.
Yeah.
So then he takes a loan, which is interest bearing, and then he's got cash, and he can use that cash for whatever he wants.
Yeah.
So it's basically like this thing where you're not necessarily having to pay tax. Ultimately, you're just kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
But I think was it last year, he was like the biggest taxpayer in the States. But, there are sort of ways where you can actually avoid these sort of taxable events through, shares and leverage.
Yeah. Awesome. It's been really awesome having you on the episode. Why don't you give us the 3 things you wish you'd done when you first started your business? Well, no, when you first got involved in the catering business, what are the 3 things you wished you'd done that you didn't do that you would do if you had to redo?
Firstly, obtain leverage.
Okay.
So we did that later, sort of over 2 years. So went to ANZ and got a couple of decent sized loans, which grew it pretty well. But that was probably the thing, is it slowed us down a lot. Or, you're just basically having to reinvest, and it's a slow grind. Whereas that's kind of a bit of a rocket fuel. Yeah. Because I think in terms of leverage, you should always take it, provided that your return on that leverage is higher than the interest rate.
Right. Yeah.
So if you're paying, say, like 10% in interest, well, then you're making, say, 50 or 60% on it, whatever it might be.
Right.
Well, then you should take that all day long. You should actually maximize it. So that was probably that's certainly one of them. Probably also just in terms of like marketing, where, not upping the marketing spend, almost like capping the marketing spend. That was probably a real mistake.
Right.
We're sort of telling yourself, oh, we're going to cap the marketing spend at, say, $1,000 a month or whatever.
Right.
Rather than actually go, well, this is working. why don't we throw, shoot a cannonball at it? Test it out, test different sort of marketing strategies. Once you've found one that works, blow it up. So I think that can, provide a lot of growth. And then probably actually not hiring quick enough.
Okay.
It was probably only 18 months ago I took on my first employee in that business. And I think, and that was again quite game changing. So the revenues went up because instead of me being distracted and not fully locked in, well, suddenly you've got someone who is. And so I think that's probably the three things that could have done sooner, but really just didn't.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the episode, John. I've really appreciate it and enjoyed it. It's been a fun episode. So, yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Cheers, man.